Growing up, Tyler Robinson was never the center of attention. He wasn't strange, just reserved, the kind of kid who kept his thoughts to himself. But in September 2025, his name would be tied to an act that stunned America, leaving classmates in disbelief and his grandmother clinging to denial. On September 10, 2025, political commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The accused shooter? Tyler Robinson, a 21-year-old from St. George, Utah. The twist that shocked the nation even more, his own family turned him in. Cameras crowd around Debbie Robinson, the grandmother of Tyler Robinson. The flashes are relentless, the microphones pushed toward her face as reporters demand answers. Tears pool in her eyes and slide down her cheeks as she shakes her head in disbelief, struggling to find words. For Debbie, the picture painted by the authorities is not just hard to accept, it is impossible. In front of the cameras, she pleads with the public to believe what she knows in her heart about her grandson. There's no way. No way he could ever be violent, she insists, her voice trembling as she speaks directly to the reporters gathered on her lawn. He's shy, quiet, gentle. I watched him grow up, every single step. I know his nature, I know his heart. He never once talked politics with me, not a single time. And guns? He never liked them, never owned one. He couldn't have made such a perfect shot. To Debbie, this is the truth she has lived with all her life, the boy she helped raise, the boy she believes she understands better than anyone. The idea that Tyler could walk onto a campus, lift a weapon, and take a man's life is so far outside of her reality that she refuses to let it sink in. In her eyes, Tyler is still the quiet child who kept to himself, a gentle presence who never once showed a violent streak. But investigators saw a very different picture. Their evidence contradicted every word Debbie poured out to the cameras. In their possession were family photos, not of a shy, fragile young man, but of Tyler smiling as he posed with heavy weaponry. Among the most striking images was one of him gripping a Browning .50 caliber machine gun, the type of weapon capable of immense destruction. For investigators, the photos were not just casual snapshots but proof that Tyler had, at some point, been around firearms, comfortable enough to pose proudly with them. This clash of perspectives, a grandmother in denial and investigators presenting stark evidence, revealed the painful divide at the heart of the Robinson family's tragedy. Debbie clung desperately to the memory of a gentle grandson, while authorities pieced together an image of a young man who had not only planned but executed one of the most shocking political assassinations in recent history. The Robinsons were Republicans, loyal Trump supporters who made their political identity clear. Debbie often said proudly and without hesitation, "There isn't a single Democrat in our family." For her, it was a matter of pride, a reflection of the values they had carried for years, and a statement she would repeat whenever politics came up in conversation. The family's conservative beliefs were not hidden, they were woven into their daily lives and their sense of who they were. But on the evening of September 9th, the night before the shooting, something subtle yet deeply unsettling began to shift. The Robinsons gathered together for dinner, expecting an ordinary family meal. The conversation moved easily at first, covering the usual small details of life. But when Charlie Kirk's upcoming speech at Utah Valley University was mentioned, everything changed. The mood at the table grew heavy as Tyler's demeanor shifted before their eyes. Breaking from his usual quietness, Tyler's voice grew sharp, filled with a bitterness that startled those sitting with him. He slammed Kirk as a man, full of hate, accusing him of spreading poison into the world. The words tumbled out with an intensity his family had never heard from him before. His tone was not casual disagreement, it carried a sharp edge, a deep anger that seemed to come from somewhere hidden and festering. His parents and grandmother sat stunned, exchanging glances across the table. This was not the Tyler they knew, the reserved and quiet young man who usually avoided political conversations altogether. Yes, they disagreed with Kirk on certain issues themselves, but never in such a way, never with such venom. For them, debates about politics were disagreements, nothing more. But for Tyler, in that moment, it sounded personal. His bitterness seemed deeper, darker. And while the family brushed off the moment as unusual, none of them could have imagined that within 24 hours, Tyler would carry that anger to a devastating conclusion. The very next day, Tyler set his plan into motion. He got into his car and drove nearly 250 miles north, making the long journey to Utah Valley University. The trip itself was uneventful, the miles of road stretching out endlessly before him, but in Tyler's mind, the purpose was fixed and clear. By the time he arrived on campus, the crowd had already gathered for the event. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle, aimed, and fired a single shot. It was quick, almost too quick for anyone around to even process what had happened. Charlie Kirk collapsed instantly, the crowd erupting into panic as screams filled the air and chaos spread across the university grounds. Within moments, the entire nation would know what had just taken place. Law enforcement responded immediately. The FBI began pulling footage, gathering eyewitness accounts, and scouring through digital trails. Within hours, they released images of the suspected shooter. The face in the photos was chillingly familiar to one family in St. George. It was Tyler Robinson. The news spread across the country like wildfire, but for the Robinsons, the nightmare was personal, unfolding inside their own home. When Matt Robinson, Tyler's father, first laid eyes on the images, his heart sank. He studied them carefully, not wanting to believe what they seemed to show. But the resemblance was undeniable. Summoning all his courage, he confronted his son directly, his voice heavy with both fear and desperation. "Tyler, this looks like you. Is this you?" Matt asked, his eyes searching his son's face for some sign of denial, some explanation that would prove the photos were wrong. Tyler sat there in silence for a long moment. Finally, he lowered his head, unable to meet his father's gaze. His answer was quiet but devastating. Yes. In that single word, the truth came crashing down on the Robinson family. There was no more room for doubt, no more hope that this was all some kind of mistake. The boy they had raised, the boy they thought they knew, had pulled the trigger in one of the most shocking political assassinations in recent American history. The house fell silent. In the rooms that had once held ordinary family noise, television hum, the clink of dishes, muffled conversation, there was now a weight that pressed the air flat. Neighbors' voices and the distant drone of news helicopters leaked in through the curtains, but inside the walls everything had narrowed to a single, unbearable moment. Tyler whispered that he'd rather die than go to prison. The confession hung between them like smoke, short, raw, impossible to ignore. It was the kind of thing that leaves people frozen, because the words are both an admission and a surrender. But Matt couldn't let things spiral. He moved as if from a different center of gravity, calm in the face of panic, thinking 2 steps ahead even while his heart hammered. He reached out to a trusted friend, a youth pastor who also worked in court security. That choice was practical and painfully intimate. It was a call for help to someone who combined spiritual steadiness with procedural know-how, someone who could shepherd a person toward the system rather than toward violence. Together they began to plan a way to end the immediate danger without adding more tragedy. On September 12, with federal agents nearby, Matt guided his son into a peaceful surrender. The scene was quiet and controlled compared to the chaos that had erupted only days before. A measured approach, officers in place, a father walking beside his son as the law took over. It was not a cinematic arrest with handcuffs flashed for cameras, it was a calculated, humane handoff meant to limit harm and protect lives, even the life of the accused. It was a father's most impossible choice, sacrificing his son's freedom for justice. The morality of that choice cut 2 ways, on one hand a parent's instinct to protect their child, on the other a larger obligation to the community and the victims. For Matt, the decision left a scar that would not heal quickly. He had chosen the difficult path of accountability over sheltering his child from consequence. The act of turning Tyler in, arranging the surrender, and cooperating with authorities would be remembered as both an act of civic duty and a family's deepest heartbreak. News vans crowded the quiet streets of St. George, their satellite dishes raised like strange metal trees against the sky. The neighborhood, usually calm and uneventful, suddenly pulsed with the energy of flashing cameras, reporters hurrying from one doorstep to another, and the low murmur of live broadcasts spilling into the air. Yellow tape fluttered in the warm breeze, marking boundaries between private life and public spectacle. Reporters knocked on doors, pressing neighbors for answers, eager to uncover anything that could explain how someone from such a quiet community had become the center of a national tragedy. One of those neighbors was Kristen Schwerman, who had known Tyler since childhood. When the cameras turned to her, her expression was a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. To her, Tyler was never the kind of boy who drew attention. He was quiet, smart, mellow, she explained, her words careful but weighted with shock. He never caused trouble. I never even knew who his friends were. Her voice carried the bewilderment of someone trying to reconcile the Tyler she remembered with the Tyler now shown on national news. The boy who kept to himself, who blended into the background of their small community, was impossible to align with the image of a young man accused of assassination. For Kristen and many of the neighbors, the sudden presence of media vans, police, and federal agents was surreal, like a story ripped from headlines and dropped into their ordinary streets. While the family wrestled with disbelief, investigators traced Tyler's online activity. It was here, in the digital shadows of his private accounts, that a far more disturbing portrait began to emerge. The Robinsons had known him as quiet, even withdrawn, but online, investigators discovered a different Tyler altogether. Behind closed doors, he wasn't just shy, he was meticulous, almost obsessive. Every click, every message, every deleted file revealed someone who had been preparing for something far darker than his family had ever imagined. Much of this activity centered on Discord, a platform often used for gaming and private chats, but in Tyler's case, it became a space where careful instructions were laid out step by step. In messages that investigators later described as chilling, Tyler had communicated with his roommate and partner, Lance Twiggs, a 22-year-old transgender woman who lived with him. What stunned investigators most was the tone of these messages. Not emotional, not angry, but calculated, as if Tyler were walking someone through a simple checklist. Get the rifle, wrap it in a towel, check the sight lines, prepare the ammo. Those were his words, stripped of hesitation, written like a set of directions one might give for a household task, not for the preparation of an assassination. Twiggs, by all accounts, had no idea what he was plotting. She read the instructions without context, assuming they were some strange obsession of his or part of a scenario she didn't fully understand. Later, once the full truth emerged, she turned over the chats to investigators, horrified by what she had unknowingly witnessed and desperate to make clear she had not been a participant in his plan. Even more disturbing details surfaced when ballistics evidence was examined. The recovered bullet casings weren't ordinary. They had been deliberately engraved, each one carrying markings that blended together elements of online culture, political slogans, and cruel irony. It was as though Tyler had tried to make the violence itself into a twisted kind of statement. One fatal round carried a message that investigators would never forget. Carved into the casing were the words, "Hey fascist, catch." That phrase, crude and mocking, seemed directed squarely at his intended target, turning the bullet into both a weapon and a piece of propaganda. Other casings carried internet jokes, fragments of memes recognizable to online communities, placed alongside anti-fascist chants and lyrics from resistance anthems. It was a bizarre fusion of irony and rage, part dark humor, part violent ideology. To investigators, the engravings revealed not just planning, but intent. This wasn't merely about pulling a trigger, it was about sending a message, one laced with the strange, hybrid language of internet subcultures. This wasn't random. Nothing about it was impulsive or spur of the moment. Investigators pieced together Tyler's digital trail and discovered just how much work had gone into preparing for the act. He had studied Charlie Kirk's schedule, tracking his planned appearances across states, zeroing in on the Utah Valley University event as the perfect opportunity. He had mapped the campus layout, noting entrances, exits, vantage points, and potential escape routes. He used encrypted apps to communicate, apps designed to erase messages after a short time or hide their contents behind layers of security. He had practiced what investigators called operational security, the same techniques used by career criminals or even intelligence operatives to avoid detection. The more they uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Tyler Robinson was not the confused, soft-spoken young man his family had always believed him to be. At least not in his final months of freedom. He had transformed into something else entirely, someone methodical, patient, and frighteningly deliberate. The bullet casings alone spoke volumes, but when combined with the online instructions, the encrypted communications, and the obsessive research, investigators had what they described as a blueprint for assassination. For the Robinson family, these revelations would land like fresh blows each time they were revealed. Debbie, his grandmother, had sworn he never liked guns, that he would never so much as touch a weapon. His parents thought his quietness was nothing more than a personality trait. But investigators now had proof that in the privacy of his digital world, Tyler had been assembling not just a plan, but an identity, an assassin who blended irony, politics, and personal anger into one carefully constructed act of violence. What shocked many experts following the case was the intersection of culture and violence revealed by the evidence. The engraved memes, the Discord instructions, the use of internet slang alongside deadly planning, it was a portrait of how online worlds can twist reality, blurring the line between joke and ideology until the two become indistinguishable. To outsiders, the engravings might look like absurd internet references. To Tyler, they were deadly serious, woven into the very bullets he prepared to fire. This level of detail showed investigators just how committed he had been. He wasn't improvising. He wasn't lashing out blindly. He had taken his time, quietly crafting an operation designed not only to kill but to send a symbolic message, one that would live on long after the act itself. And in the cold, factual breakdown of his steps, the rifle wrapped in a towel, the sightlines checked, the ammo engraved, the schedule mapped, the truth became undeniable. Tyler Robinson had walked a deliberate path toward assassination, one his family had never seen, one hidden in plain sight on the screens and servers of his digital life. Experts who later studied the case believe that Tyler's relationship with his roommate, Lance Twiggs, may have added fuel to the fire that was already burning inside him. Twiggs, a 22-year-old transgender woman, lived under the same roof, sharing the small rhythms of daily life with Tyler, conversations over meals, the ordinary routine of young adulthood. But to investigators and analysts, that connection gave Tyler's anger a personal edge. Charlie Kirk was not just another political figure in his eyes. Kirk's outspoken opposition to transgender rights meant his words cut directly into the life of someone Tyler cared about. That didn't mean Twiggs was complicit. In fact, she was the opposite. From the beginning of the investigation, she was clear, open, and cooperative. She turned over Discord logs and private messages to authorities, horrified when she realized what Tyler had been plotting right under her nose. Her cooperation helped piece together the chilling digital trail that otherwise might have remained hidden. Experts emphasized that Twiggs was not involved in any way. She, like the rest of Tyler's family, became another person blindsided by what he had done. And so, while the nation debated politics and speculation swirled, Tyler sat down to an ordinary family dinner on the night of September 9th. Around the table, plates clattered, voices mingled, and Debbie Robinson, his grandmother, recalled conversations the family had always shared. To them, it was just another evening. Tyler chewed his food quietly, answering small questions, nodding along as relatives spoke. But inside, he carried a secret that no one at that table could have guessed. Because while his family was discussing work, school, and everyday matters, Tyler was secretly finalizing the last pieces of a political assassination. He had studied Kirk's public itinerary. He had mapped out the campus at Utah Valley University. He had already tested the weapon, adjusted the scope, and readied the ammunition, bullets etched with memes and slogans that turned the internet's dark humor into a deadly signature. To everyone else, he was still the reserved young man they thought they knew. But in Tyler's mind, the clock was already ticking down. When the Robinsons finally realized the truth, they found themselves trapped in an unbearable choice. On one side was the instinct every parent feels, to protect their child, no matter what. On the other was the duty they felt to protect the public from the violent path Tyler had chosen. In the end, they chose the latter, a decision that would forever change the course of their lives. By turning him in, the family provided prosecutors with the building blocks of the case. They shared his dinner table outburst, where his anger toward Charlie Kirk had surfaced for the first time in front of them. They revealed his online trail, showing the meticulous planning he had hidden behind a quiet demeanor. They handed over the Discord messages he had sent to Twigs, chilling instructions disguised as casual orders, and even pointed to the bizarre engravings on the bullets, each one etched with dark slogans that underscored his intent. Piece by piece, investigators assembled a portrait of cold premeditation. Matt Robinson's decision to step in when he did may well have prevented more bloodshed. Authorities quietly acknowledged that Tyler had the potential to carry his plans further, to turn one act of political violence into something larger. By guiding his son into custody, Matt stopped that possibility in its tracks. But the cost to the family was enormous. Today, the Robinsons live under constant scrutiny. Some accuse them of raising a killer, of failing to see the signs earlier. Others praise them for doing the unthinkable, stopping their own son before he could take more lives. Their community, once defined by quiet streets and neighborly calm, now bears the weight of a story that has rippled across the nation. For the Robinsons, every day is a reminder of the impossible choice they made, a choice between family and justice, love and responsibility, heartbreak and sacrifice. Now, Tyler Robinson sits inside Utah County Jail, awaiting trial and facing the very real possibility of the death penalty. The days are long and monotonous, marked by the steel bars of his cell and the weight of the charges hanging over him. Each court appearance edges him closer to a verdict that could seal his fate forever. For his family, the ordeal is a prison of its own. They are trapped in contradictions, grieving the son they lost long before he ever pulled the trigger, yet knowing they are the very reason he didn't claim more lives. They are torn between love and shame, between the memory of a quiet, gentle boy and the reality of the accused assassin he became. In the eyes of the world, they are both blamed and praised, accused of raising a killer, but also honored for the courage to stop him when it mattered most. Their story is more than just a family tragedy, it has become a warning. It stands as a stark reminder of how online extremism can slowly and quietly consume someone from within, transforming an ordinary young man into something unrecognizable. It shows how rage can fester in the digital shadows, while those closest to him remain unaware until it is far too late. And for the Robinsons, the wound left behind is one that may never heal. Their home, once filled with ordinary worries about school, work, and bills, is now a place forever haunted by the choices of a son and the impossible decision they were forced to make. No matter the trial's outcome, the Robinsons will live with that fracture for the rest of their lives, a family broken by tragedy, a community shaken by violence, and a nation reminded of just how fragile the line is between quiet normalcy and unthinkable horror.